You know what's fascinating? We have more dating apps, relationship advice, and communication tools than any generation in history. Yet, people report feeling more disconnected, more confused, and more dissatisfied in their relationships than ever before. Divorce rates remain high, long-term satisfaction continues to decline, and there's this pervasive sense that something fundamental has broken down in how we connect with one another. Most relationship experts will tell you the problem is communication skills, attachment styles, or maybe toxic behavior patterns. And sure, those things matter. But what if the real crisis goes much deeper? What if the issue isn't just how we relate to each other, but a fundamental misunderstanding of who we actually are when we enter these relationships? This is where Carl Jung comes in. When I first encountered Jung's work on relationships, it completely transformed how I understood not just my own relationships, but why modern dating and marriage seems to be in such crisis. Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst who founded analytical psychology. Originally a close colleague of Sigmund Freud, they eventually parted ways because Jung believed Freud's theories were too reductive. Jung saw something much more complex happening in the human psyche, something that had profound implications for how we love and connect. Here's what Jung understood that most modern relationship advice completely misses. We don't enter relationships as whole, self-aware individuals. We enter them as fragmented beings, carrying enormous unconscious baggage, projecting our internal dramas onto our partners, and expecting them to complete us in ways that are fundamentally impossible. The modern relationship crisis, according to Jung, isn't about finding the right person or learning the right communication techniques. It's about unconsciousness. Most people are utterly unaware of their own psychological depths, and they bring all that unexamined material into their intimate relationships, where it inevitably explodes. Think about it this way. When you meet someone you're attracted to, you're not actually seeing them. You're seeing a complex mixture of who they actually are, who you want them to be, who they remind you of from your past, and projections from your own unconscious mind. Jung called this phenomenon projection, and it's one of the primary reasons relationships fail. Modern culture actually makes these problems worse. We're told to find ourselves in relationships, to seek our other half, to look for someone who completes us. These phrases aren't romantic, they're psychological disasters waiting to happen. They set up expectations that no human being could ever fulfill, and they prevent us from doing the real work that Jung believed was essential. The work of individuation, of becoming whole within ourselves. So, in this video, I'm going to walk you through Jung's key insights about why relationships suffer, and more importantly, what we can actually do about it. We're going to cover the shadow, the anima, and animus, projection, the persona, and the concept of individuation. These aren't just abstract psychological terms. They're maps to understanding the hidden dynamics that are probably affecting your relationships right now. And here's what I found most powerful about Jung's approach. It's not pessimistic. Yes, he believed relationships are incredibly difficult and that most people enter them unconsciously. But he also believed that relationships could be one of the most powerful vehicles for psychological growth and genuine transformation if we're willing to do the inner work. If you've ever wondered why your relationships keep following the same patterns, why you keep attracting the same type of person, or why that initial spark always seems to fade into disappointment and conflict, stay with me. Jung's answers might be uncomfortable, but they're also liberating, because they put the power back in your hands. Let's start with Jung's most famous concept, the shadow. The shadow is everything about yourself that you've repressed, denied, or refused to acknowledge. It's the parts of you that you deemed unacceptable, usually during childhood, and pushed down into your unconscious. These might be qualities like aggression, selfishness, neediness, sexuality, jealousy, or vulnerability. Whatever your family, culture, or religion taught you was bad, you learned to hide not just from others, but from yourself. Here's where it gets relevant to relationships. The shadow doesn't disappear just because you've repressed it. It's still there, operating beneath your conscious awareness, and it has enormous power over your relationship choices and patterns. Jung observed something absolutely fascinating. We tend to be most attracted to people who carry qualities from our shadow. If you've repressed your anger and present yourself as always pleasant and agreeable, you'll likely be drawn to someone who expresses anger freely. If you've denied your neediness and pride yourself on independence, you might be attracted to someone clingy and dependent. Why does this happen? Because there's a part of you that wants to experience these repressed qualities, but you can't allow yourself to own them directly. So instead, you unconsciously seek them out in a partner. You get to experience these qualities vicariously through them while still maintaining your self-image. This creates a predictable relationship pattern that Jung observed repeatedly. Initial, intense attraction, followed by idealization, followed by increasing criticism and rejection of the very qualities you were initially drawn to. The person you once found magnetically attractive for their spontaneity now seems reckless. The partner you admired for their confidence now seems arrogant. The person whose emotional expressiveness enchanted you now seems exhausting. What's really happening is that you're encountering your own shadow projected onto your partner, and it makes you deeply uncomfortable. Instead of recognizing these qualities as aspects of yourself that you need to integrate, you blame your partner for possessing them. The relationship becomes a battlefield where you're actually fighting against parts of yourself. Modern relationships suffer enormously from shadow dynamics because we live in a culture that encourages extreme shadow formation. We're taught to curate perfect versions of ourselves for social media, to present only our best qualities, to hide anything that might be judged as negative or weak. The bigger your shadow grows, the more unconscious material you're carrying into your relationships. Your shadow doesn't just affect who you're attracted to, it also determines what triggers you in relationships. The behaviors that make you most angry, most judgmental, or most contemptuous in your partner, those are almost certainly shadow projections. You're not reacting to them, you're reacting to parts of yourself that you can't accept. Jung would say that one of the primary purposes of intimate relationships is to make the shadow conscious. Your partner acts as a mirror, reflecting back the parts of you that you've disowned. This is why relationships are so difficult, but also why they're so valuable for psychological growth. But most people don't do this work. Instead, they blame the partner and the relationship and seek someone new, only to discover the same patterns emerging with the next person. They go through life-changing partners, but never changing the underlying dynamics. The way out, according to Jung, is shadow work. This means actively investigating what triggers you, what you judge in others, and what you find yourself repeatedly criticizing. These are clues to your shadow content. Instead of projecting these qualities onto your partner and attacking them for it, you need to ask, what part of me does this represent? This is incredibly difficult work because it requires you to admit to things you've spent your entire life denying. If you've built your identity around being rational and controlled, admitting that you're also emotional feels like death. If you've prided yourself on independence, acknowledging your neediness feels shameful. Integrating your shadow doesn't mean acting out every repressed impulse. It means becoming conscious of these qualities, accepting that they exist within you, and learning to relate to them in healthy ways. You can acknowledge your anger without being cruel. You can recognize your neediness without being clingy. The gift of shadow work in relationships is that it frees your partner from the burden of carrying your projections. They get to be a real person instead of a screen for your unconscious material. When you stop projecting your shadow onto them, the things that once triggered you no longer have the same power. Now we get to what Jung considered one of the deepest sources of relationship conflict, the anima and animus. Here's the basic idea. Jung observed that within every man's psyche, there exists a feminine dimension that he called the anima. And within every woman's psyche, there exists a masculine dimension called the animus. These aren't just arbitrary concepts. Jung believed they emerged from thousands of years of evolutionary and cultural experience. The anima and animus are unconscious. Most people have no idea they exist, yet they have enormous power over relationship choices, expectations, and projections. They represent your inner image of the opposite sex, and you inevitably project this image onto your romantic partners. For men, The anima might carry qualities like emotionality, intuition, tenderness, and creativity qualities that traditional masculine socialization often suppresses. But when a man hasn't developed a conscious relationship with his anima, he projects it entirely onto women. He expects the women in his life to carry all the emotional intelligence, all the intuition, all the relational work. He wants them to be his gateway to the feeling world that he's disconnected from within himself. For women, the animus might carry qualities like assertion, logic, ambition, and courage, qualities that traditional feminine socialization often discourages. But when a woman hasn't developed a conscious relationship with her animus, she projects it onto men. She might look to men to provide certainty, protection, decisiveness, and direction, things she actually possesses but hasn't claimed within herself. Here's where modern relationships get messy. Most people are walking around with completely unconscious anima and animus figures, projecting them onto partners who can never actually fulfill what these projections demand. The man projects his anima onto his partner and expects her to be mysterious, nurturing, and emotionally available, but also to never have needs of her own. The woman projects her animus onto her partner and expects him to be strong, decisive, and protective, but also to somehow read her mind and intuit her unspoken needs. These expectations are impossible. No real human being can successfully carry someone else's anima or animus projection. Your partner is a real person with their own psychology, their own struggles, their own shadow. They cannot be your ideal image of masculinity or femininity. They cannot complete you or provide access to the dimensions of yourself that you've neglected to develop. Jung observed a predictable pattern in relationships affected by anima and animus projections. First, there's enchantment. The projection creates an almost magical sense of recognition. This is what I've been looking for, people feel. There's an immediate sense of familiarity and rightness, but it's not based on who the person actually is. It's based on your internal image. Then comes the disappointment phase. The real person begins to emerge from behind the projection. They have moods, needs, opinions, and behaviors that don't match your inner template. The man discovers his partner isn't always a mysterious source of emotional wisdom. Sometimes she's tired or irritable. The woman discovers her partner isn't always strong and certain. Sometimes he's confused or needs support. The projection begins to crumble, and with it, the enchantment. Most relationships end at this stage. People feel they've been deceived, that their partner changed, or that they simply weren't compatible. They don't realize the real issue is that they were never actually relating to their partner as a real person. They were relating to their own anima or animus projection. Modern culture makes this problem worse in several ways. First, we're bombarded with idealized images of masculinity and femininity that strengthen these archetypal projections. Social media, advertising, and entertainment constantly reinforce unrealistic standards. Second, we've largely abandoned gender-specific initiation processes that historically helped people develop conscious relationships with their anima or animus. Third, we've adopted the toxic belief that finding the right partner is the solution to our psychological incompleteness. But here's what Jung understood. The anima and animus aren't problems to be solved by finding the right partner. They're inner figures that need to be developed within yourself. A man needs to cultivate his own emotional intelligence, his own capacity for intuition and relationship. A woman needs to develop her own assertion, her own clear thinking, her own ambition and courage. These aren't qualities you should outsource to a partner. When you do this work, develop a conscious relationship with your inner opposite, something remarkable happens. You stop demanding that your partner carry these qualities for you. You stop being disappointed when they don't match your ideal template. You start seeing them as they actually are, which is always more interesting and more human than any projection could be. This means you can finally have an adult relationship based on mutual reality rather than mutual projection. Instead of seeking completion through your partner, you bring your increasing wholeness to the relationship. There's another dimension of Jung's psychology that's critical for understanding modern relationship dysfunction, the concept of the persona. The persona is your social mask. It's the face you present to the world, the role you adopt to navigate social expectations. Jung didn't think the persona was inherently bad. We all need some level of social adaptation. The problem comes when we identify completely with our persona and lose touch with who we actually are beneath the mask. In modern times, the pressure to maintain an impressive persona has become overwhelming. We curate our social media profiles, perform versions of ourselves at work, and present carefully edited versions of our lives. We develop personas around being successful, being attractive, being interesting, being laid back, whatever identity we think will earn us validation. Here's where this becomes a relationship crisis. Most people enter relationships wearing their persona, and they unconsciously expect their partner to validate and support that false self. They're not looking for someone who will love them as they actually are. They're looking for someone who will confirm and admire the mask. Think about how modern dating works. People present highly curated versions of themselves designed to attract. They're performing their best persona, and so is their potential partner. Two personas meet, are attracted to each other, and begin a relationship. But personas can't actually love each other. They're not real. This creates several predictable problems. First, both people in the relationship are exhausted because maintaining a persona requires constant effort. You can never fully relax. You're always managing how you appear, monitoring whether you're living up to your own image. Relationships should be spaces of refuge and authenticity, but when both people are performing personas, they become stages where you're always on. Second, there's inevitable disappointment when cracks in the persona start to show. Your partner sees you're not always the easygoing person you presented yourself as, or the ultra-capable person, or the endlessly positive person. They feel deceived, but the deception wasn't intentional. You've just identified so completely with your persona that you genuinely don't know who you are without it. Third, when you're identified with your persona, you're not available for real intimacy. Intimacy requires vulnerability, which means letting your partner see beneath the mask. But if you think the mask is who you are, letting it drop feels like annihilation. So you keep performing, keep maintaining the image, and wonder why the relationship feels superficial. Jung would say that one of the essential tasks in a healthy relationship is mutual unmasking. Both people need to feel safe enough to gradually reveal who they actually are beneath their personas. This is terrifying because it risks rejection. What if your partner doesn't like who you really are? What if they were only attracted to the mask? But here's the paradox. The relationship can only become real and satisfying when both people are willing to take that risk. As long as you're relating persona to persona, you're just two actors performing for each other. There's no genuine contact, no real knowing, no authentic love. Modern culture actively prevents this unmasking. We're taught to put your best foot forward, to never let them see you sweat. Dating advice tells you to be mysterious, to play hard to get, to present yourself as high value. All of this is persona reinforcement. Social media has amplified this to an absurd degree. People are now curating not just their public personas, but their relationship personas. They post the highlights, the romantic moments, creating this impression of perfect partnership while the actual relationship might be struggling. The way out, according to Jung, is to develop a healthy relationship with your persona. This means recognizing it as a tool, a social adaptation, but not your true identity. In intimate relationships, you need to be willing to be seen without it. This requires tremendous courage, being willing to show your partner your insecurities, your wounds, your less attractive qualities. When both people can do this, when they can mutually unmask, real intimacy becomes possible. Not love for an image, but love for an actual, flawed, complex human being. Now, let's connect these concepts to understand why people keep experiencing the same relationship problems over and over again, even with different partners. Here's what Jung observed. Most people go through life completely unconscious of their shadow, their anima or animus projections, and their persona identification. They enter relationships with all of this unconscious material active, projecting it onto their partners, and then wondering why things keep going wrong. The typical pattern looks like this. You meet someone. There's immediate attraction, partly based on shadow projection they carry qualities you've repressed. There's also anima or animus projection. They seem to embody your ideal image of masculinity or femininity. And both of you are presenting your best personas, your most attractive masks. The early phase feels magical. The projections create a sense of completion. This person gets me. We're so compatible. I finally found the right one. But what you're actually experiencing is the mirror of your own unconscious material. You're not really seeing your partner, you're seeing your projections. Then reality sets in. Your partner starts showing up as their actual self rather than your projection. They have needs, moods, flaws, and behaviors that don't match your unconscious template. The qualities you were initially attracted to start irritating you. The shadow material they were carrying for you becomes intolerable. The persona starts cracking on both sides. At this point, most people conclude they were wrong about the relationship. They think they chose the wrong person, that their partner changed, or that they're simply incompatible. So they end the relationship and start looking for someone new. But here's the trap. They haven't done any psychological work. They haven't examined their shadow, retrieved their projections, or become conscious of their persona. So they enter the next relationship with exactly the same unconscious material, and the pattern repeats. You might choose someone who seems completely different from your last partner, but if you're still unconscious, you'll recreate the same dynamics in a different form. The external details change: different personality, different background, different situation, but the underlying psychological patterns remain the same. This is why people often describe feeling stuck in relationship patterns. They keep attracting emotionally unavailable partners, or partners who become controlling, or partners who eventually betray them. They're not actually attracting these people through bad luck or poor judgment. They're unconsciously selecting partners who will play out their unexamined psychological dynamics. Jung would say, this isn't a problem to be solved by better partner selection or improved dating strategies. The problem is unconsciousness. Until you become aware of your shadow, your projections, your persona, and your unconscious patterns, you'll keep recreating the same relationship dynamics regardless of who you're with. This might sound pessimistic, but Jung actually saw it as hopeful. The fact that your patterns keep repeating means your psyche is trying to get your attention. Each failed relationship is an opportunity to become more conscious. Each trigger, each disappointment, each familiar conflict is showing you something about your own unconscious material that needs integration. The question is whether you're willing to look inward instead of just blaming your partners or searching for someone better. Most people aren't. They'd rather maintain their unconsciousness and keep hoping the next relationship will be different. But for those willing to do the work, the repetitive patterns become teachers rather than tormentors. This brings us to Jung's ultimate answer to the relationship crisis: individuation. This is the process that breaks the cycle and makes genuine intimacy possible. We've covered the shadow, the anima, and animus, and the persona. Now we need to talk about the concept that ties all of this together: Jung's concept of individuation. Individuation is Jung's term for the process of becoming a whole, integrated individual. It's about making the unconscious conscious. It's about integrating the shadow, developing a relationship with the anima or animus, recognizing your persona as a mask rather than your identity, and ultimately discovering who you actually are beneath all these psychological structures. Here's what's radical about Jung's approach. He believed that individuation, not happiness, is the real goal of human life. And he believed that relationships, despite being incredibly difficult, are one of the primary arenas where individuation happens. Most people approach relationships with the unconscious goal of finding completion through another person. They're looking for someone to make them happy, to give their life meaning. This is why the idea of a soulmate or other half is so appealing. Jung would say this is exactly backwards. You can't find wholeness through another person. Wholeness is something you have to develop within yourself. Until you engage with this work, you'll keep creating unconscious relationship dynamics that prevent real intimacy. Let me break down what individuation actually involves. First, individuation requires you to take back your projections. Remember projecting your shadow onto your partner, or projecting your anima or animus? Individuation means recognizing these projections, owning the qualities you've been seeing in your partner as parts of yourself, and integrating them. This is painful work. It means admitting that the things you despise in your partner might reflect disowned parts of yourself. It means recognizing that the qualities you depend on your partner to provide are actually capacities you need to develop within yourself. It means taking full responsibility for your own psychological wholeness instead of expecting your relationship to provide it. Second, individuation requires you to confront your persona and develop a more authentic way of being. This means being willing to disappoint people, to let go of idealized images of who you should be, and to discover who you actually are beneath all the conditioning. In a relationship, this means showing up authentically, even when it's not flattering or impressive. Third, individuation involves what Jung called holding the tension of opposites. This means being able to contain contradictory aspects of yourself without either repressing one side or swinging wildly between them. You can be both strong and vulnerable, both independent and connected, both rational and emotional. In relationships, this capacity is crucial. Most couples unconsciously split into opposites. One person becomes the emotional one, the other becomes the logical one. One becomes the responsible one, the other becomes the spontaneous one. These polarizations happen because each person is only owning one side of these natural tensions. Individuation means reclaiming both poles. Instead of your partner having to carry your emotionality or your rationality or your need for freedom or your need for connection, you develop the capacity to hold these tensions within yourself. This is tremendously liberating for the relationship. Now, here's what this means practically. Jung believed that the early phase of a relationship is almost inevitably unconscious. You're attracted to someone partly through projection, partly through anima or animus dynamics. This is normal. The question is whether you stay at that unconscious level or use the relationship as a vehicle for individuation. Most relationships stay unconscious. The projections never get examined. The shadow dynamics continue to play out. Both people remain identified with their personas. They blame each other for problems that are actually expressions of their own unconscious material. The relationship becomes a repetitive loop of projection, conflict, and disappointment. But some relationships become what Jung called individuation partnerships. This is when both people commit to using their relationship as a mirror for their own psychological work. Instead of blaming your partner for triggering you, you investigate why you're triggered. Instead of demanding your partner change, you look at what's being revealed about your own unconscious patterns. This is incredibly challenging because it requires both people to be committed to their own psychological development. If only one person is doing this work, the relationship becomes unbalanced. But when both people are committed to individuation, the relationship transforms into something remarkable. It becomes a space where both people are constantly being challenged to become more conscious, more whole, more authentically themselves. The conflicts don't disappear. If anything, they might intensify, but their meaning changes. They're no longer just personality clashes. They're opportunities for psychological insight and growth. Jung's approach to relationships is not easy. It's much easier to blame your partner, to look for someone new, to stay unconscious. Individuation requires profound honesty, uncomfortable self-examination, and the willingness to abandon comforting illusions. But for those who are willing, Jung's approach offers something that conventional relationship advice never can: a path toward genuine transformation. Not just better communication skills, but actual psychological development that changes who you are and how you relate. When you stop looking to your partner to complete you and start doing the work of becoming whole within yourself, your relationships often become much more satisfying. Not because you've found the right person, but because you've become someone capable of real intimacy, real love, and real partnership. The crisis in modern relationships is ultimately a crisis of consciousness. We're trying to have intimate relationships while remaining unconscious of our own psychological depths. The solution isn't better dating apps or relationship advice. It's deeper personal work. It's shadow integration, developing a conscious relationship with your anima or animus, recognizing your persona, and pursuing individuation. When you do this work, relationships don't become easier, they become real. And real relationships between two people pursuing their own wholeness, that's what Jung believed was actually possible.